Hey everyone, I hope you're all having a fantastic day so far. Today, I want to talk about taxation when it comes to contractors within the UK. Now, I want to make this abundantly clear. I'm not an accountant, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just merely somebody who is talking about their own personal experiences. But of course, all of this stuff needs to be fact checked, and you need to ensure that you're doing your own due diligence when it comes to your money and finances in general. Now, with that said, let's get into the video. Now, the first thing I want to say is, as you already know, especially for those people who've watched my videos before, there are two types of contractor: the inside IR35 and outside IR35. And you're probably thinking, why does he say this all the time if you watch my stuff? Just so you're educated, just so you understand. And the inside IR35, for tax purposes, under the eyes of the HMRC, are seen as individuals who are doing works that are similar to somebody who is working for an end client or somebody who is permanent, okay, a permanent member of staff. So they get national insurance tax, they get income tax, they get all the different taxes. And of course, their organization has employer tax, NI tax added to that as well in terms of, all this taxation stuff. So hopefully it gives you an idea. So their tax is similar to somebody who's doing a 9-to-5 job. Now, it doesn't mean they're the same as somebody doing a 9-to-5 job in terms of how they're treated, but in terms of the tax perspective, and probably when people clock in and clock out and all that kind of stuff there, it's probably very similar, if not quite similar. But of course, there are the advantages of the contractor who has the flex with their holiday. They have flex in other terms of things, especially when it comes to their own contracts, as they can leave when they want, etc., etc. So they're not tied to the end client organization. Now, of course, with the outside IR35 stuff, it's different because HMRC deem you as somebody who is a business, or deems your activity under business activities, so to speak, as opposed to employee activities. And so with that in mind, taxation is going to be different. You all have corporation tax. I believe there is also income tax. There are things to think about when it comes to dividends and also business expenses and all that kind of stuff there. So hopefully that gives you an idea. Now, of course, HMRC decided to have this whole IR35 thing because there were individuals, I think within the IT industry or whatever it may be, I don't know the actual story, I'm not old enough to know properly, but essentially they would quit on a Friday, okay, and become contractors on a Monday, earning whatever they were earning, whether it was 1.5 times double or 3 times the amount. And so obviously when it came to this, HMRC were like, no, we need our monies. You can't just be doing this willy-nilly, like it doesn't work like that. And so with that in mind, they had this taxation system to ensure that obviously Her Majesty, the Queen, and now the King obviously is getting their fair share when it comes to the taxes as they deem fair and best fit. There's politics around this, but I can't really say anything about it, so we're going to leave it there. So the second thing I want to say about that is, if you are inside of IR35, essentially you are operating under an umbrella company. So under the eyes of HMRC, the umbrella company, which is basically a limited company that deals with accounts and your tax and your pay and paying the agent and getting the monies from the end client and all that kind of stuff there, they are the ones who are deemed as your employer contractually, okay? Now, you're not delivering the services for them. You're just using their limited company in order to, again, do all of this stuff. So bear this in mind. Now, of course, there's a bit of a fee when it comes to that umbrella setup. I think it's like anywhere between 12 to 21 pounds per week out of your salary, so to speak. And typically with these organizations, you get paid on a weekly basis, which is really cool. Sometimes it can be monthly, but you get paid on a weekly basis. Now, of course, contracts are set up through them. So if you have any issues when it comes to your contract, it's set up through them. In addition to that, if you are outside of IR35, then you're going to be set up via either a sole tradership or a limited company. It's typically a limited company. Now, of course, you can set this up yourself via the gov.uk website. I think it's £14 to set up a limited company. It may have changed by then, but I know that's how much it cost me. If you're going through an agent, as an example, or an agency and or an accountant, then they can set up everything for you accurately. And I think they charge like £100, okay? Because obviously they have their service fee on top of that stuff. Now, I would recommend that you do it via an agent and or an accountant, should I say. Ignore the agent part. I meant to say accountant. So with that in mind, everything is just patterned properly from the get-go. Everything's done properly. You don't have to like worry or think about what category am I in, am I part of this, da 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 da. They can do that all for you, okay? Especially if your business is specific to an outside IR35 contract setup. So once that's done and that's all set up, then it's thinking about the next steps. Now, of course, when it comes to setting up as a limited company, you will become a company director. You'll have shares, okay? So maybe your shares will be worth £1 for one share. It can be different depending on what your strategy or setup is. This is something that we don't really talk about as contractors, so to speak. But if you're also using this company for other stuff, then you may want to think about that more specifically. You may want to speak to, your accountant and or whomever to give you some steer in terms of how you want to set that up. But for the purpose of the contracting, I don't think it's a big deal. Just leave it to £1 to one share. But again, this is not me advising you. This is just what I did. I just kept it nice and simple, nothing crazy. Now, of course, you could have a company secretary. You could also have people work under you, known as subcontractors. And essentially, all their payments will come into your account. But of course, part of that payment will go into the subcontractors sort of account as well. So you're acting as their employer, so to speak. So it's a really nice setup if you are outside of IR35 because there's some elaborate stuff that you can do. Okay, and I'm not going to get into the complications of all of that now, but just know you have the possibility to do that. Now, of course, you have to understand that there are different tax-free allowances that come with obviously being a contractor or an employee of any types. So, for example, the tax-free allowance for most individuals is 12,570, I want to say, but that may be wrong. So let's just say it's 12.5 grand. And after that, there are different thresholds, okay? From the 50 grand and after that from the hundreds or whatever it may be. And you can check that on the gov.uk website. And the reason I'm specifically not giving you specific figures is because these numbers change all the time, okay? So it may be X figure now, it may be another figure in 2025, 2026, etc., etc. So just look at the website to see what the thresholds are, what your tax-free allowance looks like. Now, in the grand scheme of things, obviously if you're becoming a contractor for the first time and you've just had your sort of tax period with your last job, and let's say you start on the 5th of April, okay, I'm choosing that date specifically, you will get paid what you get paid with no tax up until that initial threshold. And once you pass a certain threshold, this is for inside of IR35, by the way, because of course they're taxed similar to an employee. Of course, if you pass that 12.5 threshold, and let's say you earn £15,000 in a month, okay, maybe 2 months, then of course the difference between the 15,000 and the 12,500 is what you'll start to get taxed on based on the next tier up, the next threshold. And then when you pass, let's say for example, the 50,000, then you get taxed the difference from that 50,000. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay. I've done a video on this before, so you can check it out. I think it's something like what £500 a day looks like. So you can check that out for yourself. Now, of course, with outside of IR35, it's different. It's going to be different, and I believe the corporation tax is 20% of recording, but again, you can check that for yourself. But just note, obviously, that means that if you're outside of IR35, you could make more money. It's as simple as that. And this is why there are a lot of individuals who want to be outside of IR35, because there's a huge shift. There's a huge drastic shift in terms of how much money you could make. Now, it may mean the setup is a bit different and you have to start thinking about things and all that kind of stuff there. So for example, you need to start thinking about how much money do you actually take out of your account and stuff versus what you need to keep for tax purposes. This is all stuff you need to bear in mind, but we'll come to that in a minute. Now, of course, you have to think to yourself, what constitutes someone as inside of IR35? Now there's a number of things, okay? So for example, I've heard people who have worked for the same organization for almost 4 or 5 years. It's crazy. And their rates are, there may be tech rates, there may be finance rates. So it's bad boy money. And obviously, HMRC doesn't like that because it feels like it's being cheated. So with that in mind, here are some conditions to think about. Now, number one, they don't like the fact that if you're working for the same organization for a very, very long time, then it may indicate that you're pretty much part of the furniture. So why why wouldn't we tax you like an employee? It doesn't make sense, you know. The second thing is understanding that if the end client or a hiring manager or somebody has a lot of control on the person's time, delivery, performance, effort, management, etc., just like a manager would, then it's kind of like, well, clearly this person is just a glorified employee. That's essentially what they are. So we need to tax their ass. we're not trying to get them to get away with it. Another thing is, are they fully integrated into the operations of this stuff? And when I think about my own experience, that's definitely happened in many situations. And that's definitely not happened in other situations. You know, when I was working for, well, let's just say to the COVID response, should we say, nothing was normal about that situation in any way, shape or form. It just was not normal. So there is no way that would be seen as an inside. We'll leave it there. So there are different things that you can draw on to understand whether it's inside or outside or whatever it may be. If you can't substitute yourself for a subcontractor, like I said before, or somebody else, or whatever it may be, because, you know, maybe you're ill, maybe you've got something to do, whatever it may be, you are not truly deemed as somebody who's working outside of I-35. It just doesn't make sense, you know? And the last thing is, and you may not know this, if you're working inside of IR35, of course, the umbrella company has setups with all of this sort of stuff that supports its employees, i.e. the inside IR35 contractors. So inside IR35 contractors will get some benefits, which are not really spoken about, such as pension, okay? Which you should definitely check for yourself, or discounts, or 24-hour GP consultation services, or financial aid services, or whatever it may be. Mortgage services, obviously they're trying to sell you their stuff in it. It's all affiliate links, mate. It's all affiliate links. Point being made is, if you have these benefits, then it's almost like, well, are you really outside of IR35? I don't think you are. I don't think you are. So again, these are things to think about. Now, moving away from the whole IR35 rule side of things, and it hopefully should give you an idea of what outside looks like, there's also things like expenses to think about. The really good thing about tracking your expenses and everything else is that it reduces your tax liability, so to speak. And so, you know, you can think about things like the laptop that you use, travel costs. This could be training costs. This could be marketing and advertising stuff, any sort of development. It could also be things like your Microsoft Office, things that you specifically use for the services that run your business, so to speak, as an outside IR35 contractor. Think creatively, think honestly, and think about all the different things that contribute to all of this stuff. Sometimes certain premiums for insurance can also be taxed as well. But again, don't look at me, please. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a financial advisor. Go and speak to those people. This video is encouraging you to go and speak to these different people. And so I remember there was a time where I did sort of like the analysis on the breakdown of different expenses I had and handed it in, and it just meant that my taxes were really low, and they can go all the way back if need be. They can go all the way back, of course, if it's relevant to, you know, obviously you doing business activity back then or whatever it may be. So have a conversation with them and see what they say when it comes to your situation. Now, of course, there are ways to plan to become more efficient when it comes to your tax. Now, I have to admit, I don't plan to do this because I think that's kind of what I pay my accountant to do. But at the same time, I have the due diligence to ensure that certain things are in place. So there are some of these things that I do inadvertently, but I don't put it down as planning. So for example, being sure and clear about your contract, okay? If you're not sure and clear about your contract, you may be deemed as outside as opposed to inside. So there needs to be some clarification points in terms of what it is that you're actually delivering, okay? That's the first thing. The second thing is, if you're working outside of IR35, obviously there's salary and dividends to think about. And anytime you withdraw anything, that may be liable to national insurance contributions. So again, you want to make sure that you're taking up the minimal amount of money that is required for you to live. You should be doing that anyway when it comes to budgeting and living a bit frugally if it makes sense for you. If it doesn't make sense for you, then don't worry about what I'm saying at all. But think about all of this stuff. Again, the third thing, which comes back to the whole expenses point, be clear about what it is that you're tracking in terms of expenses. So keep invoices, keep receipts, acknowledge different things that you've paid for. Don't overlook certain things. Maybe you may be able to save some money when it comes to your home space because you use it, you're working from home and you're using it as your office. Okay, so think about that sort of stuff. When it comes to working inside of IR35, I know there are a lot of umbrella companies that do salary sacrifice. I know my one does. Okay, salary sacrifice is a way for them to sort of like draw in more money from your income, so to speak, to minimize the sort of like tax on your income, etc., etc. So it's making you more efficient, so to speak. Okay, so there are ways around it. And so if you don't have a salary sacrifice, situation, that you can speak to your accountant to see, again, if it's something that needs to be looked at. There's also things like making sure that you assess your IR35 status. Now, I know gov.uk have their own sort of like setup, and once you complete that, you go on their system. However, you can sort of like sit down with your accountant or a specialist to make sure that actually, do you know what? I'm actually outside of IR35. I shouldn't be inside, or I'm inside of IR35. I shouldn't be doing outside work. Sometimes your insurance company, such as Knightsbridge, may have a specialist who may be able to help you with some of this stuff. But again, this is all something you need to check with your insurance company and your specialist as well. I would actually have a sit down with my accountant every, 3 to 6 months. And I do this inadvertently via the phone. I don't sit down with them because they're somewhere else. But the point being made is, it helps you understand, like, am I doing things correct? Am I structured the right way? Has it been set up the right way? Are there people who can sit underneath my company to help support certain things? Think about all of this stuff. This is all really important. And so every time there is a change to your business, I know I've done this, I let my accountant know. I let them know. Now, of course, if you have an accountant that is FCSA approved, I think it's Freelance Contracting Something Association. I've forgotten what the S stands for, self-employed maybe. That's good because it has the badge of honor, and there are other types of accrediting bodies or membership bodies that show that certain accountancies are best fit for certain contractors or contracting type style work. And so with that in mind, find those types of organizations and companies because typically they do both inside and outside of IR35 management of money. Okay. Now, of course, things can range in terms of how much you spend on your accountant. Okay. It could be anywhere from like 15 to 25 pounds a month to even $3,000 a year. Who knows? Okay. It all depends. It may be a one-off payment. Point I'm making is just do your due diligence and make sure you check to see that you're happy with all of this stuff. Okay. Now, I want to bang on about this point. Ensure that you seek legal advice wherever you go. Ensure it. Okay. And if it's not legal, okay, which it will be by virtue of what you're doing, it also needs to be professional. It needs to be professional. So speak to the professionals, i.e. the accountants, i.e. the tax specialists or the legal person or whatever it may be, so that you're not avoiding anything or you're not doing anything negligent when you should be knowing if you are doing anything negligent. Like, you have that awareness, you're developing this stuff for yourself. The other thing I want to say is you can't miss the submission of your tax returns. You just can't do it. I'm sorry. And I'm not saying people do this purposely, but you need to take it seriously because HMRC don't play. They will find your fine, you know what. They trust me. Like, I remember one time at the beginning, before I did contracting, just with my limited company, I didn't submit certain like returns, so to speak. And I didn't do it on purpose. I thought I did something, well, whatever it may be. Penalty came in, £100. Next year, I thought this is never happening again. So I wrote everything down and made sure I follow the process, whatever it may be. Penalty again. Third time, you're out. I thought, I'm not playing. I'm not doing this. We're not playing these games. So I just got someone to do it for me. And the rest is history. It taught me a lesson. So don't try and do it yourself. There's just no point. I just don't see the point in doing it. So hopefully that's given you a deep dive, a good comprehensive view of what you need to be thinking about as a contractor when it comes to tax. Okay, something that shouldn't be played with. We understand why tax came into play. I think tax was born when democracy was born in the Greek times or whatever it may be, with the aim to try and fund everything around us, so to speak. Whether we think it's extortionate or not, well, it exists. Okay, so it's best that you understand as a contractor, especially because we don't give it the time of day in terms of what needs to be done from a tax perspective as a contractor. Again, falling outside of this stuff, if you're a professional leader, okay, maybe you're an independent consultant or somebody who owns a portfolio and is looking to have some sort of coach by your side who is helping you make better decisions, think more strategically, act more ethically, and raise performance for yourself and your teams, then hit me up. Let's have a conversation. Maybe we can sit down and we can see how we can help you become a better version of yourself. If you want to see more videos tailored around life management and portfolio careers, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.